Check 1, 2.
Go! Curious about real estate? Yes! Then you've come to the right place. Get the knowledge you need. Get over the fear and get started. This is the Michael Quarles Real Estate Show with your host, Michael Quarles.
Hello everybody, Michael Quarles, and this is Podcast 75. And this is a great podcast for those of you who needed more information regarding seller financing. I have with me Gabriel Contreras. Say hello, Gabriel.
Hello, glad to be here today.
Well, it's going to be a fun day. Gabriel does all the work around here from a negotiation perspective after the Alex and after the Ryan. And I thought no one could be better to discuss some of the ways he's getting us seller financing on these deals. I wanted to go over with him, grill him like a piece of bacon on seller financing, wrap, subject to, exchangeable collateral, subordinated deeds, early payoff, no due on sale, first right of refusal to buy the note, all those kinds of good things. So Gabriel, what is seller financing?
Seller financing, basically it just boils down to your seller is your lender. That's really all it is. Instead of either you buying it with your own cash or going out and getting a loan from a traditional lender or a hard money lender or any other kind of loan, the lender is the one that goes ahead and acts as your lender, which means you end up owing him or her the amount agreed on that you'll be paying him, and it usually amounts to some sort of payment to him to cash him out, and there could be all kinds of different structures to those payments.
Okay, so we understand that. I think everybody listening in can wrap their head around that one. I'm going to back up a little bit and say, if we don't have seller financing in our model here that we use at the office, and we are dealing with a cash model, what's our cash offer? What does it have to be? What's the percentage that we say it can't be any greater than this percentage? What percentage is that?
Well, the percentage is something that we use just as a guideline, actually, and we work somewhere around 65% just as a guideline. After buying so many houses, hundreds of them, you kind of figure out most of them you're going to end up succeeding at a certain point, and so we use that as one of the guidelines. We also itemize our offers to get a better idea, and again, after doing so many of them, it pretty much ends up matching one way and the other, so it just kind of confirms that we're doing it right. So that is the amount of money that we actually buy when it comes to a cash deal. That is also derived at as from our business plan, because we all need to figure out, I will do this amount of work for this much, and it could vary for one investor versus another.
Right. And what I like about that number, now guys and gals, that's not our minimum number, that's our maximum number. That's an important distinction. But what I like about that number from a cash perspective is that it is so close to our equity lender's position on what they'll do that it fits. Anytime we're out there, we're saying we'll give you 80 cents on the dollar cash, but we have to go to an equity lender or a hard money lender, boy, that means we're going to have to bring a lot of money to the table because they're not going to loan at that rate. So I like the 65 as a maximum. But when we start getting into, or as we start getting into situations where we have a lot of properties to buy, we have to start looking at seller financing, because unless we're Bill Gates or some of those billionaires, we don't have enough money to buy them all with cash. How do you know, when do you turn, how do you start the communication process with the seller to take them from, I can give you 65 cents on the dollar this way, or we can talk about these other solutions which would be subject to seller financing, those kinds of things?
Yeah, that's a good question. And what I'd like to do is actually throw in a little comment about, you mentioned a hard money lender.
Right.
You know, sometimes we get frustrated or upset about the fact that these hard money lenders or equity lenders out there, they will not exceed a certain guideline. I actually think that that's a good thing. That's actually a safety net for us, and somebody else saying, hey, I can't give you that much money because it's not that good of a deal. You shouldn't be buying it for that much money. So it's actually a great safety net that we should look at positively versus, oh, wow, I need to find a different one that'll give me more money. Don't do that. There's a reason for that.
For you guys and gals out there, if you read between the lines that I did with what Gabriel just said he just said, and this is a fantastic opportunity for those of you that are struggling a little bit with valuation. He said, call a hard money lender and find out from them what their maximum loan amount will be on that property. And you can pretty much be assured that's the value of the property.
Because they're not going to lend you any more than
right.
that.
So,
yes.
So you can almost do some mathematical reversal there and say, okay, if this lender's at 60% maximum loan to value, well, then you can kind of tell through your hard money guy what that value of the property is. And he'll have or she'll have more experience than most of us in valuation, because when they're starting to put their money at risk, they really, really, really hammer valuation. And they're extremely good at it. So if you have a problem with valuation, call a hard money guy or gal and see what they said the property's worth.
Yep, and then I'll tell you what they'll lend, and if you're paying more than that, you shouldn't be. That's the way I look at it anyways. Going back to what I think your question was, I believe the question was, when do we start presenting, or when do we start looking for the opportunity to talk about terms?
Right, because we have the Alex that gathers a lot of the information, beats them up at the end. Is that the least you'll take? Can you see yourself doing better? Can you help yourself out more? We set the appointment for the Ryan. The Ryan goes and does a preliminary CMA, pulls data from, I think, 7 different data sets, so we can have an idea of if the seller's telling us the truth or not. And then we're going to start making an offer, and we're making a cash offer, but we want to convert that cash offer to a finance offer.
Yes. The answer to when do we start looking for terms is way at the beginning of it. All the way back to when Alex is having a conversation with the seller, we start prompting for the opportunity to present terms. Now, it's not always the fact that it went beyond our 65% guideline that we do terms. We look for terms in every deal.
So even at the 65% guideline, you'd still say, what are you going to do with the money? What do you need the money? Or are you willing to finance the right buyer? And of course, when you say that to the seller in person, you want to pat yourself on the chest and shake your head up and down. And somehow the seller's going to say, oh, you're the right buyer that I'm supposed to finance. So we're always looking for that opportunity.
No matter where we buy it at. I mean, I could buy it at 50 cents on the dollar, and we're still going to be looking for the opportunity.
I think we did that a couple days ago. Didn't we get one for 40 cents on the dollar? It was crazy.
It is, you just got to look for it from the beginning of it. And that's in the questions, that's in your script, okay? The questions such as, what have you done with it, or what are you going to do with the property? Is it rented? That's asking them if they're rented is just basically asking them, are you accustomed to taking monthly installments? Is really what that's all about.
And the majority of us, and the majority of you guys listening, you're marketing to absentee owners, which means they're collecting a payment every month. They're dividing that payment up amongst their insurance company, their tax assessor, their mortgage company, if they have one, or giving the balance to themselves. So they're already accustomed to, one, taking less from a net perspective at the end of the day, but then accepting a payment. So we're going to convert the rental payment and call it a mortgage payment.
That's correct. So that's what we're prompting for, even at the stage that Alex gets to talk to them. Is the house rented? Depending on which, we've got a couple of versions of the scripts. Some of them will go into more details. Does it rent for? What do you think it'll rent for as a maximum? Just prompting for information on that. Condition of the property, okay, if there's got repairs, they're used to having to deal with them, getting them to give us information that we can use later on so that we can let them know, hey, you know, we're going to have all these repairs to do. So it's going to take some time. And there's that key word. It's going to take some time because you've shared with us that it has $20,000 worth of repairs. There's a tenant in there. They're in the process of eviction. So as you can see, all the information is going to be used into presenting what we're looking for. And if you had to boil it down to what is terms is, give me some time to give you your money.
Now, we know that there are factors when you look at term. We know we have the amount of money that we're going to pay for the property. We know we have the down payment, if any, that we're going to pay on the property. We know the interest rate that we're going to pay on the property. And we know the length of that term of mortgage that we have on that property. So those are the four components to a finance transaction, correct?
And they were, again, the
amount we pay.
The amount we paid, the down payment.
The interest we are charged, and the length that we get to pay that payment. How many payments there are.
How many payments, yep. And then, of course, if you want to talk about, I think you mentioned the rates that you're going to get it at. Installments, no installments, the separation of the installments, because it could be once a month, it could be once a quarter, it could be once a year, it could be accrued interest where I pay it all to you at the end. Just an entire beautiful menu of ways that you can present a great looking picture that will benefit the seller and help us.
And in some cases, it's helping the seller.
In most cases, I have to believe that in every case I'm helping the seller.
Right.
I have to go off of that theory.
We have yet to ever have a seller who had said no that we have seller financing with. So they must have thought it was a benefit.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
For everybody listening, you have to ask the question about seller financing. If you don't ask the question, you're not going to gain anything. And asking the question and getting a no answer is something that you already have. You can only improve your position by asking for seller financing. Now, there are ways to do that. Of course, you have to build the benefit. And so how do we build that benefit with the seller?
Most of the time, the benefit is going to come because we end up disagreeing with the walkaway amount. Although we've just talked about that we're going to ask for it even when we're getting a great deal better than our business model minimums or maximums, we're going to be asking for it. But a lot of the times, it's going to be used to go ahead and offer an alternative to an all-cash purchase. That's going to be the biggest one, and that's really terms is going to be about getting deals that we wouldn't have gotten if we just stick to one way of doing it, buying cash for a low price.
And you can do so many more deals, folks. I hate saying it, but we all only have so much cash in reserve, and using your cash should be your last option. In my opinion, you should always be looking for sub-2 money, always be looking for seller finance money, and using your cash should be your last recourse. So let's talk a little bit about the types of seller financing formulas that are out there, because they're a little bit different. So we can do a seller note. Let's assume for a second the house is 100% paid for, so we don't have any liens against the property that we're going to take sub-2. So that's just a straight seller
financing, 100% financed by the seller. Okay.
No big deal. And we break that down how for them?
Well, there's a couple ways that you can do it. One is basically buying it and just creating a mortgage, and you what do you call it? Seller financing. Okay. Where the seller is the bank, you sell the property, he transfers the title to you. That's one. And then there's also what is called the payment for deed, installment note, There's different terminologies as to what what you use.
So in those two situations, you have, on your first one, you have a seller financed mortgage that deed transfers to you.
Correct.
The second situation is a note seller carryback. That's basically a performance note. So when you're done with the performance of paying all the payments, then you get the deed.
That is correct. And actually, that could be structured any which way that you and the seller agree to. So it doesn't have to, you could say installment note, and I will give you the deed, or I will transfer the deed to you upon such performance. And it could be pay me 24 payments, pay me 60 payments, or pay me completely. It's all a negotiation between the buyer and the seller as to when that deed actually gets transferred. It's more designed for when we're selling the property. That's the best way to do it. We don't actually transfer the deed until our buyer performs to a certain level that makes us comfortable. But it also could be used to buy. We can actually go ahead and make our seller, feel comfortable doing it for us because they are in so much control. Of course, the buyer is also protected. There's the trail of paperwork that happens, and both ways. It'll be done through escrow or a closing attorney. So the trail of paperwork is all there to protect both the buyer and the seller. This is not about trying to get a fast one on either way, whether you're buying or you're selling. But it just does allow the seller to remain in more control with the installment note.
Now, instantly, as you're explaining that, one of the things that comes to mind is never wanting to put a prepayment penalty on that second type of transaction. Because I want to go out there, because my intention is to go ahead and resell the property as fast as I can. I don't want to be penalized by paying that seller off early.
Right. That's going to the other extreme. We start by saying how hard it is to get it. Now, when you talk about putting a prepayment penalty, we're talking about a seller that doesn't want his money.
Right.
So that'd be on the other side of the spectrum. And yeah, absolutely. When we get the opportunity to sell this house, pull out whatever money we have sitting there and go out and buy another one with, we want to take advantage of that, and we don't want to be penalized for it. As a matter of fact, you're probably going to introduce the other side of it. And instead of getting penalized, is creating a benefit of paying it early.
Prior to that, the other thing I was thinking, if I have a seller, gals, if I have a seller that says, no, I don't want to get paid off too soon, there's an instrument for that. And that's a beautiful seller, because some sellers, they want to do this installment sell, and they want to collect their money over a certain period of time so that they're taxed over a certain period of time. And that allows us to start communicating with them about what, Gabriel?
Substitution of collateral, is that what you're looking
Correct.
for? There it is. Sure. If the seller does not want to get paid back and they actually want to continue to earn that, continue to get those payments, and possibly, because not in all of them, continue to earn interest, then we can go ahead and help those sellers by simply taking those funds, go out and either buy a new piece of property with those funds, or transfer that note over to another piece of property that we already own and attach it to that other piece of property.
Now, here's what I don't want any of you guys to do. You should never transfer more money onto a property than that property is worth. Although there are a lot of properties that have more money owed against them than they're worth, I don't believe for a moment you should do that. I don't think it's a moral or an ethical thing, even though you probably could do that. So if you have a house and it has an 80% loan-to-value loan that you took sub 2, and you have to put what would be another 40% somewhere, you should not put it on that 80% loan already. That would be unfair in my opinion. Now in that case, Gabriel, their only thing they could do is to have that loan at that point uncollateralized. So it'd be just a straight note without security.
Yes, and there again, it's just a matter of judgment in your business model as to whether or not you're going to do that. There's alternatives for that. I mean, you can always just put it on hold. You can leave those funds in escrow while you find the property. You can split the note, as an example. You mentioned you've got a 40%. Okay, we'll take 20 of that and create one note for that property, take 20% and put it on another property. Now the seller is double secured and still under, or at least at no more than the value of the property. Different things that you can do, always keep it in mind.
I wouldn't want to do a blanket note where I put the entire note on two pieces of property.
You can do that too, but you're correct. What I was talking about is actually splitting it.
Right.
Now you create two notes out of one.
And not a blanket note. So we're not tying up two pieces of property with one note. We split those notes.
Correct. And it could be done either way, but you're right. I mean, it's now you're possibly overprotecting and giving a lot of. Now you're going to be depending on that seller to allow you to move forward and sell one property or the other. So yes, you'll be under their control, if you would, on more than one property.
Right. So we can either do a straight seller finance, no big deal. We could do a seller who says, I want to do a performance type note, so you don't get the deed. We talked about if we paid it off, not having to do on sale, a prepayment penalty. We talked about if they wanted to keep their note in place, so we have exchangeable collateral. We talked about splitting the note. We talked about blanket notes. What if we have a seller that comes to us and says, if you could orchestrate something where I'll do seller financing and I'll agree to the 15-year amortized schedule, but if I come to you and I want my money in a year, I want an instrument for that. What do we do there?
Well, what we can do is make it attractive for us to be able to do that. If somebody comes and does that, we'd be glad to do that. We just need to be incentivized, I suppose, and that is a reduction of the balance. We'd love to be able to pay you off as long as it makes financial sense. We purchased a property based on a financial plan that what was it going to get us in the long term. If we shorten that amount of time, then our original plan to buy it doesn't work out anymore. What is that amount of money that we're losing out if we do pay you early, Mr. Seller? It's this amount. So if you'd like to go ahead and have your money, sure. We just need a principal reduction of a justifiable amount to be able to pay them back.
And these are positive conversations we have with sellers that allows them to say yes and understand seller financing, because in this situation, they have the ability to get some money if they decide to do something anytime during the loan. Just like if they put the money in the Bank of America on a T-bill that was a 60-month T-bill, if they pulled it out earlier, there'd be a little bit of penalty. That's all this is. The same kind of concept.
That's exactly what that is.
Now, we also, when we're orchestrating seller financing, let's talk a little bit about the due on sell clause, on whether or not we should allow one, have one, not have one. Should we allow a seller to say, you can't sell this property and keep my loan in place, you have to pay me off?
Not going to do that, because my plan is to go ahead and sell the properties on terms, which means I'm going to offer terms to my future buyer. and I don't want that clause to prohibit me from doing that. And anything that alienates us from the property violates that due on sale clause. Whether I go ahead and later put it under a lease option, okay, that would constitute a violation of that due on sale clause because we now have given some sort of interest to somebody else. So the answer is no, I do not. I'm not going to allow a due on sale clause on there.
Now, from my perspective, since I'm a wholesaler, not really a buy and hold guy, although, yuck, I now have some rentals. Yuck again. I'm going to extinguish that most likely anyway, although I still don't want that restriction on my note, because I never know at the end of the day what's going to happen. And I don't want something that can negatively impact a sell that I think I'm going to flip, that I turn into a resell where I'm doing maybe a wrap around seller financing or something along that line. So I don't want that instrument in place. What about, let's talk a little bit about, and you hear about this all the time, these note buyers. How do we protect ourselves from the note buyer?
Well, what we do is we have a first right of refusal. And that's exactly what that is. We want to be the first one to have the opportunity to buy the note should the seller decide to sell it. So, the paper it's an instrument that can be sold. There's an entire industry out there, an entire market for it. People go chasing it. I've actually done it. I've bought notes and there's just a whole business of it over there. So what we want to do is make sure that if the seller decides to go ahead and sell the note, that we are the number one in line to have the opportunity to buy it, and to have the opportunity to buy it at the amount that they have for themselves found a buyer, whatever that amount may be.
How do we confirm the legitimacy of that? I mean, say a seller said, well, I've got this guy and he's willing to give me 99 cents on the dollar, which we know that's not going to happen, but let's assume, and we say no, and then he goes and sells us at 60 cents on the dollar. How do we find that out?
Well, the due on sale clause is part of the recording documents. A lot of this stuff is going to be recorded on there on the mortgage or that gets recorded in county records, and we have to sign off on it.
Okay.
When title or the attorney goes to transfer ownership of that paper, of that note, just like transferring the actual title to the property, it needs to go through the process of doing the research, and any ownership or interest or interested party to that transaction will need to sign off on it.
And because our interest is recorded, it has constructive notice to the world, and we should be notified at that point. So that's seller financing 101, baby, with no underlying lien or mortgage. Let's talk a little bit about seller financing with a sub 2 note in place. So what I have here is I have a house. It's worth 100. I can pay 65 cents on the dollar cash. I have a $30,000 Bank of America first trust deed mortgage, and I have a seller willing to take a $30,000 seller finance, and I got to put up $5,000 to do the deal. Give me some ways that we are putting those deals together.
Okay, give me those numbers again, Michael.
We have a $100,000
house.
We're buying it for $65,000.
Okay.
We have a $30,000 B of A.
Okay.
And we have the seller is willing to do a $30,000 seller carryback.
Okay.
And we have $5,000 to the seller.
Wow, that's a pretty good deal.
So are we tying the seller to the sub 2? Is the seller going to, so are we wrapping that sub 2? Are we doing a junior note with that seller? What is the best instrument for us to buy this property?
Okay, and the answer to that would be yes, yes, or no, no. You can do any of those choices, which is to do a wraparound mortgage or an all-inclusive deed of trust. Or you can go ahead and do subject to the existing first and create a second junior note to the seller. You can go either way.
Give me the advantage to the seller of doing the wrap.
The advantage to the seller doing the wrap is control for the seller.
And give me the disadvantage doing the wrap to the buyer.
The disadvantage is there's a couple of them in there. Number one, that note that's in there now, it's probably already in its future years. If it's a 30-year note, it might already be into its 20th year or 25th year, whatever it may be at. So the reduction of principal in that note may be more attractive than the wraparound mortgage would be starting from day one. That's one of them.
Let me back up here so everybody understands that, because there's a big thing there. So I took out a mortgage with Bank of America 15 years ago, and my monthly payments were whatever they were. I've paid that mortgage down to $30,000, and I know that my payments stay the same, but the principal payment, or the payment that I'm paying towards my principal balance, is increasing month after month after month, and the interest I'm paying is decreasing month after month after month. What Gabriel just said is if you take that loan and wrap it, it starts all over again. So if you would have not wrapped it, your payment, a larger portion of your payment would go to principal. In a wrap, less portion of your payment goes to principal. Is that correct?
That's correct. So as an example, let's assume that the $30,000 mortgage has a $300 payment, and if we were to create a second to the seller, and let's just call it another $300, so you're going to be putting out $600 total. So if we leave the note there, from the first $300, a lot of that is going to go, or more of that is going to go into paying down the principal of it, and on the second $300, most of it is going to go into interest. If we do the wraparound mortgage for a, say, $60,000 wraparound note, then we'll send out the same amount, the $600, but now less of it is going towards the reduction of our underlying principal balance.
And that's something we don't want. Now, the other thing I don't ever like, and we see this every once in a great while, as honest as we are, that we're telling the sellers we're making huge amounts of money. We're telling the sellers that we're going to do whatever we think we need to do to the property. Sometimes that's nothing. Then we're going to resell it for a lot of money, profit. Sometimes the sellers don't hear us clearly as they should hear us, and they get a little jealous. And if on that wrap, in order to get them out of the way, I have to completely pay off the entire wrap. Where if it was a junior note, to get them out of the way, I'd pay them their portion. I've only dealt with it one time where the seller just made it almost impossible for me to sell this property. Although there are rules and laws and regulations that require them to get their beneficiary statements into closing companies within a certain period of time, they can sure slow stuff down if they wanted to. So I always like the ability to get them out of the way with a little bit of money or some money and not all the money. Have you ever experienced that?
Where the seller just doesn't want for you to sell your property?
Right.
Not really. I mean, most of the time that I've had it, they would be glad to get their money. As a matter of fact, I can almost plan that it's going to be a future opportunity. They want their money. We just happen to sell them on the fantastic idea of not receiving it up front most of the time. But most of us, if we're introduced to, hey, okay, would you like a sack of cash right now? you're going to lose out on some benefits.
In
Most
this
of them will
case,
say
she
yes.
became jealous because we were now making another $40,000 or $50,000 on her house.
And she discovered that.
Right, and
Based
she
on
goes, "Wait a
yourself.
second, I should have made that money." And
Sure.
and no, we disclosed everything's up front.
Yep.
So junior financing for me is always a little bit better than the wrap financing, but sometimes because these people don't know us, it's amazing to me. We meet these folks, we talk to them over the phone, so we never really see them, shake their hand. Some of them trust us, like they understand it. Some of them don't even know who we are, so they don't have any form or ability to trust us, although they should. So I do understand why the wrap is needed in the case where the seller is open to seller financing, but not as open because they just don't know who we are. And have you ever, I assume we could, can you ever unwind a wrap and turn it back to a junior after performance has been done?
I suppose you can. I mean, there's almost nothing that a seller and a buyer can't agree to do at any point. So if it's an agreement on both of them. And so one of the things I want to make sure that is clear in our program, Michael, is we were talking about two different choices, whether it be to leave an existing loan on there and create a second to the seller, or to do a wraparound. Our choice will always be to go ahead and go to not so. Most of the time, we're shooting for keeping the mortgage in place that's there, subject to, and creating a second note. There has been occasions where that's not the way I want. And the reason why I would introduce the wraparound mortgage, all-inclusive deed of trust, is simply because the seller is questioning, will we be faithful to the payment on the existing loan?
Right.
And so it just basically says, you know what, if you want to guarantee it, if you want to maintain in control of that, why don't I just send you the full payment, and then you can continue to make forward the amount that goes to the underlying loan.
And then, if going back to the first conversation we had about seller financing, if the seller was super unwilling, then we could do an installment wrap.
That would be going into, hey, Mr. Seller, why don't we go ahead and do the same thing we just talked about, a wraparound mortgage, and we'll do it on an installment plan or a note for deed. There's different, there's different ways to call them. Performance contracts, whatever it is. And it just boils down, why don't I do this on my end first? You don't even have to trust me yet. When I get to that point, then let's agree that you will go ahead and transfer the deed over to us.
And then maybe at a later date, convert that deed into not a wrap, but a second or junior loan. So guys and gals, this is all about understanding all the little complexities and all the little things that you could do with the seller and an opportunity. Because here's what happens with most sellers when they get their money. Keep in mind, people that have money tied up in a property aren't people that typically need that money, because you wouldn't have it tied up in the property. You would have had it refinanced out already. So when you buy a house from someone who is already self-financing, they're already loaning the money on the property, it's an easy question to say or ask, would you like to continue doing what you're doing? Except this time, I'm actually going to give you an interest rate, where when they have a 100% seller finance note in place for themselves, the one thing they're not doing is charging themselves an interest rate, correct?
Right.
I want to give them that interest rate. So Gabriel, we've talked in length about what is good and bad about interest rates and how much we should offer. But what is the minimum amount that we can offer a seller and feel morally and ethically correct in doing so?
Well, there's all kinds of guidelines. The biggest one is the federal guideline.
Okay.
They, whether or not you're charging interest, you being the seller, you being the the person that lent the money to your buyer. You could do 0% interest, and I've done them. They just need to know what's the consequences of it is. We just need to disclose it to them, and that's exactly what I have done.
Now, what he's talking about is there's a consequence to the seller from a tax perspective, because the IRS believes that a no interest loan is much like if you were sold furniture and you said there's 0 interest over the next 5 years. Well, what you've basically done, you've put the interest within the price tag of the item that you sold. So the government believes that, and so they're going to charge you a tax on what is the common interest at the time, right?
That's correct. And it's pretty low, 1.9. It varies.
Right.
They have services online that you can go at any day and find out what it is at the time. So, whatever the rate of that federal guideline is definitely one to go with. You won't have to do all the explaining. You won't have to disclose anything that they're going to get taxed. They're going to be having tax consequences. And then the other thing, Michael, there's so much out there that this is just going off of things that we continue to use. And every time we use it, we verify it, we consult. So we're not tax consultants. We're not, financial advisors. We're not attorneys. But this is information that is out there, and or could be had from the professionals if you need to go get the details of it.
So 0 is the least we can charge. What are we comfortable paying?
We are comfortable paying anything that the house can afford.
So I hope everybody understands that. And much like, and it's kind of the opposite of the seller doing a 0 interest loan to us. We will pay as much of the house that it'll afford, assuming that we get the house at the low enough value, right?
Right. And I guess I could add to that, as much as the house and the deal can afford. Right. So if I were to go get an equity loan at 65 cents on the dollar, so I've got a $100,000 house that I go get a hard money loan, let's say at 10% for $65,000. Well, I can pay the seller 12 or 15 or there's guidelines for that as well. Right. But let's just work the numbers. I can pay the seller 15% instead of 10% to the hard money lender.
How's that happen?
It just needs to put the numbers into the calculator and figure out what if the hard money lender was going to lend me 65 at 10%, I can pay 15%, but that amount is going to be less, and that amount will be representing our price. Okay. So it's just
So Mr. Again, Seller. So if 65 was 10, then and that's 65 about 6,500 a year. If you do a math equation and divide 15% into the 6,500, that would give you the maximum amount that you could pay for the house.
Right.
Which wouldn't be 65. But 10% is a lot. Now, I know if the seller was going to take $60,000 and go down and put it in Wells Fargo on a T-bill, they might make a couple percent, or percent, maybe 1.5%. And they're going to lock it up for a few years and have a withdrawal penalty if they take it out. I'm very, very comfortable offering them the same thing that everybody else would offer them to do the same thing. Right?
That and more.
Yeah. And so on a good day, would we consider 5% okay?
Absolutely. Like I said, we can consider any number as long as it makes financial sense for what the house can afford. When I talk about the house being able to afford it, I'm now talking about rents and whatnot, and also the deal, making sure that going right back to our business model and what we want our profit to be in each deal. That's what I'm talking about when I say, can the house afford it? Can the deal afford it?
So, just to clarify for some of the folks on the call, on the podcast, if I sit out there as a hoteler and I need to get seller financing, but I know that I'm only going to hold the property a month or two, no big deal, maybe a week kind of thing. You know, in a week, the difference between 10% and 20%, it's not a lot of money. But if I were a buy and hold guy, or if I thought that would be what was going to happen to the property, maybe it was an iffy flip, I certainly wouldn't want my interest rate so large and my payments so great that it exceeds anything that I could collect.
Right.
And that's what you're speaking to.
Right.
So you have to look at both models somewhat together, because worst case scenario, guys, we have to rent the properties out. And, you know, I'm going to raise my hand on that one. We've all bought the ugly duckling. No reason it didn't sell except it just didn't sell. And you hold on to it. You know, it's the house that falls out of escrow 5 times. And you have to make sure that you haven't overcommitted yourself in a big way. So confirm that you can do that. So what do we do, Gabriel, about down payment? What has our experience been when we have a seller that will offer a seller financing? How many times have we said, fine, but they also want a down payment?
That's fine.
No, but how many times does that actually happen? Do they ever want a down payment and seller financing?
Well, whenever they do, I allow them to ask for it because I'm not going to offer it.
What do you mean you're not going to say, would you like a down payment?
I'm not going to, my defaulted offer is a amount of purchase price. It would need to be
divided over so many years.
That's right.
So guys and gals, what he just said was, if I'm a seller and I'm open to seller financing and I have this $100,000 piece of property and I'm willing to sell it for $65,000 seller financing, the only thing he's going to ask me then is when I want my money. He's not going to ask me what interest rate I want to earn on my money, because it can be 0. And he's not going to ask me how much down payment I want.
And I'm also not going to ask you, do you want installments?
So it's very clear. When do you want your money? And let the seller say yes to that. Now, check with your attorney and your accountant about your balloon payment situation and owner-occupied and non-owner occupied and all that kind of good stuff. Have a good attorney. I know when I get my attorney and my accountant together, I'm spending about $1,000 an hour, and it's a great $1,000 on questions as it relates to your transaction and what you're trying to accomplish. But you should always seek counsel. Always make sure you're doing things morally, ethically, and mostly legal in some situations, or in all situations. So we've kind of covered our cash basis. We've done wraps. We've talked a little bit about sub 2 and whether or not we want to do a juniors or wraps and installment sales. We've talked about splitting the notes. We've talked about a blanket deed or note, and we've talked about some other things. Talked about the due on sale. We talked about early payment. We talked about buying the note if they try to sell it to somebody else. What are we missing on this conversation? I want to get all the good stuff in it.
I think we covered most of it. Payments does, that's
Wait a second. We have in our agreement, guys, get this, Gabriel did it. It wasn't even my fault. Gabriel did it. He put in, we can miss one payment a year. Why did you do that?
It's just other ways. It's just other ways of being able to make sense of the deal. Okay? And that allows us to bring in that missing profit that wouldn't show up, say, at the beginning of this whole transaction, especially the price. There's a way to get them what they want and us get what we want. If they're stuck on price, okay, that's fine. just calculate, I'm willing to pay 65. They won't settle for anything less than 70. I'm 5, whether it be percent or let's just convert it into dollars, $5,000 apart. Fine. Where can I find a way to get that other $5,000?
So if you were going to buy and hold this, and it was a $1,000 payment, then you knew if you held it for 5 years, you would not have to make a payment for 5 years, for 5 times during those 5 years.
Sure, and that's that's a little bitty one that you could do.
Right.
There's just so many ways that you can get what you want. It's going to be in exchange for time, and that's what we talked about earlier. What is seller financing? And that's all it is. Give me time in exchange for some of the value, some of the money that I'm going to have to give you more. If that makes sense.
Sure. Now, why would give us some examples of why our sellers are accepting seller financing?
That's a great point, and there's 2 sides to that. The main reason is going to be because they don't like our cash offer. Bottom line, it's just not a number that they're willing to go with. Mm-hmm. And so that opens up 2 things. One, a second opportunity for us to present a different offer, constructed with so many tools, so many ways, so many avenues, to where we're going to end up getting what we're wanting to get anyways. Okay? But here's another thing that happens, Michael. Besides the fact that they end up getting a bigger number, it also sometimes converts our original offer into now, although it's the same thing, more attractive to them. Because they now see, okay, I can get more, but I'm going to have to put up with all of this. You know what? This original offer has now become more attractive.
So they can say yes to the lower value offer better.
That's
Easier.
correct.
Easier. Now, guys and gals, and I'm going to say this happens, I wanted to say 50%. Maybe that's too much. Maybe it's only 49.9. But this happens a lot on seller finance deals. And let me help you guys understand this. When you're done with this seller finance deal, when you pay these sellers off and you've been professional throughout your payment process, reusing the money is extremely easy. Keep in mind, they don't have a place for it except a bank. They don't want to use it. You have proven to them that you're honorable, professional. You've done everything that you've agreed to do. Asking them to do it again on another piece of property, now they're not seller financing. They're financing. They're a great resource for money. So when you enter into a seller finance deal, make sure that you can commit to everything you say you will commit to. It's extremely, extremely, extremely important. Anything left undone, Gabe?
We can go on forever on this.
Yeah.
There's just so many variations of what you can do one with the other and implement this and part of that, and it's just great. The one thing that I do want to point out is earlier I mentioned we introduce it in every deal. And in every deal, whether it's a good enough deal buying it cash, most of the time it's going to be implemented because the seller ends up getting more than our cash price. But what is important is that we ask for it every time, because every time we don't ask for it, we definitely don't get it. And we don't get it every time.
Right. And it's not easy to ask for, because anytime you do something for the first time, it's not easy. But you just have to bear down and go do it and ask. If you're a coaching student of ours, you can absolutely get us on the phone and say, how do I ask? And some of you have actually asked us to ask their seller. So we've gotten on the phone with the seller and negotiated seller financing. So it's one of the advantages of the coaching program, I guess. But understand you have to ask. If you don't ask, you have a no answer already, so you might as well improve your position. And you can buy so much more property with seller financing. So go out there and grab it. If you have a question, we've got a forum up. All you got to do is ask questions. We'll answer your question as much as we can. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. You guys take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Michael Quarles Real Estate Show. Get more info and stay in touch at michaelquarles.com.